Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at an Echo PB-7910 backpack blower. Customer complaint is that it won't start. Sometimes he gets an intermittent pop. You can see by that cable and those shredded wires that our problem is most likely with the kill switch grounding out and him not getting spark. We're going to go through the steps of replacing the throttle cable, and I'll show you how that's done. So the first thing I want to do is remove the air filter cover and then the air filter base. Now there's actually quite a few screws holding this base in place, and a T25 or 27 driver will pop these out of here. So there's a couple of them that go through the carburetor, and then there's going to be a couple more hidden down below. There's one up here on the right that holds that air filter box in place. So a single screw kind of holds this rubber cover, and then under this cover there's a couple more screws. We pop them off. So replacing this cable isn't that big a deal, but it can get complicated when we get into the handle, and I'll show you that later. So we're just popping the carburetor off the studs here, and I'm releasing the throttle cable by opening the throttle and then popping the ferrule out of the holder on the carburetor. Once the cable is released, I can take a 10mm wrench and break the nut loose that holds the cable onto the carburetor, and we'll just slide that off of there. And then the two wires that go to the kill switch, one of them is like a butt connector that's plugged in, and the other one is a ground. So we've got that ground removed from the engine block. What are we looking for now? Here's our new cable. You can see that ground eyelet there. And the adjuster nuts for the slack that's going to be in the cable. And I'm just kind of getting it close, comparing it to the old cable. So when I put it together, I might not even have to change that adjustment. Pretty simple. We're just going to drop it into place. Make sure that the cable's oriented the right way, facing down, and then snug the nut up. Now I pulled the slack out of the cable from the other end, and I'm just pulling out what I need here. And I'm dropping the ferrule of the cable into the receiver on the carburetor. Pretty simple stuff. So the cable end is connected on this side. Here's the screw for our ground lug. And basically the way this switch works is when those two wires have a connection, then you're connecting the ground that's on the engine block directly through the switch and back to the ignition coil and shorting it out. And that's what kills the engine. So this side, the connections are made. We just got to bolt the carburetor back on. So far, pretty easy. Just make sure that you have all the parts. Now, those bushings laying there, we didn't take them out. They fell out. So be mindful of that so you don't lose any parts. Here's our gasket. We want to make sure we orient it the correct way so that the impulse hole in the manifold lines up with the carburetor. Just kind of pushing the bolts through the gasket, and then the bolts are holding the gasket, and we're going to attach it to the insulator block or intake manifold, whatever you want to call it. Here's our bolts with bushings. I'm just checking to see if all the bolts are the same length, and they are. So we're not tightening anything up yet. We're just getting them all started. And then once they're all started, we can snug them down. Put that rubber flap back on there. I didn't even stop to look at what this flap does, but I can only imagine it keeps dirt out of somewhere. Alright, that's tightened down. Get our 2 carb screws tightened down. And then our last air box mounting screw. Alright, that's good enough for this end. Let's take a look at that handle. This thing's kind of clumsy to move around on the workbench. It's a pretty small bench for this, actually. And I could work on it on the bench behind me there, but I don't have anywhere to hang the camera back there. So if you're going to open up a trigger handle like this, you got to really pay attention as soon as you start opening it up as to what parts are in there and where, and if there's any springs. Right now I'm kind of just guiding the new cable where it has to go, and I discover that there's a screw missing back there, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit. So we're going to pull the screws out of the handle, and the handle's not going to just fall apart here. I still have to take that knob off of there because the 2 handle halves, the knob goes through both of those halves. I just realized that, or remembered that. I've done this a few times, but I don't know. I've done a lot of things a few times, so it gets blurry sometimes. Alright, as soon as we take it apart, we're going to take a look, and there's a spring right there. So I wanted to identify that. Now, as far as trigger handles go, this one's pretty busy. You got that block that the cable sheath runs through. You've got the switch that's got to go in there a certain way. You've got that little clip on the one wire. Everything's got to line up just right. So let's remove the cable from the trigger. And then we'll remove the whole assembly from this holder. And that holder actually has an adjustment screw in it, right there. It slides that whole block forward and back to take the slack out of the cable. Alright, now there's this clip that's right here. It's got to pop off. Like a grounding clip. Probably anti-static or anti-shock kind of thing. Then we remove the switch. But look at the switch before you remove it. And the reason why is the switch has to go in a certain way. If I put it that way, it would be, the actuation of the switch would be backward. So we'll take a look at the old switch, and we'll see that of the 2 posts, you got a center one and then a left one. Nothing on the right. So that's how we got to put it back in here. So that the posts are oriented the same way. And then you can see that's how the switch is actuated. Kind of a simple solution, but works pretty good using a switch that was already in the inventory, you know. So I'm connecting the throttle cable. And, you know, this whole process goes a lot easier when you can just clamp the thing to the bench and start adding the parts. I'm trying to hold it up by the camera, and I'm running out of hands, to be honest with you. I don't want to lose that trigger because there's a spring on it, and I'd have to figure out where the spring goes again if it came flying off of there. So I'm just going to clamp it down. So I just gained the use of one hand again. Here's our adjuster screw. The whole cable and sheath is in that adjuster block. Kind of got to get it into place there, kind of laid in there. Get the wires to set down in the groove. And try and clip that grounding strap in place. Really a fumbly job. Get everything tucked in there decent, because we don't want to pinch anything when we put it back together. The one wire is being stubborn. So now I had the bright idea to leave that clamp in there and just kind of pop it out of place, right? Bang. Except that the stupid clamp shedded the little end of it there. It's still in the way. Everything got screwed up and fell apart, and extra pieces laying inside, and I wasn't too happy about that. So we kind of got to start over here again. We'll get this block to try and lay into place with the adjuster screw where it belongs. All right, there we go. Put the clamp back on, this time without that extra piece on it. Try and tuck the wires back in. And you might have noticed that my background audio is gone. The Neanderthal knuckle draggers on the other side of the shop were pretty active during this repair, and I couldn't use a lot of the audio. So there, that looked like it worked a lot better the second time. And it actually works pretty good if you clamp that whole thing down to the vise, or to the bench top. Then you really gain use of both your hands and put everything together. We got her though. We'll get these screws back in here. You know, while I was editing this, I was thinking about all that background noise, and I'm going to look into adding a directional microphone to the camera. And I just wanted to take this moment to thank everyone that supports the channel and watches the videos and maybe purchases a carb stand or stickers or whatever it might be. And that allows me to go ahead and buy like the nicer camera that I've got here, and maybe a shotgun microphone. So thank you. All right, we've got our handle mounted back on the tube. Now we're going to spin this whole works around again. I'm going to show you where this locating tab is. First we're going to clip this. You know, if somebody could figure out a way to eliminate this thing hanging out here, they'd have $1 million idea. Blower tube without an external cable would be wonderful. So this cable just kind of clamps into the fan body, and then the orange engine cover sits over the top of it. And there was no screw here. This screw I'm putting in actually came out of a Husky chainsaw or something, but it's the only one I had. But it locks the cable in place. And probably what happened initially was someone caught that cable up near the elbow of the tube and got a big yank and pulled on the sheath, and eventually worked back and forth, and that's what stripped the wires, and it's a big mess. Grapes! So there you go. Let's give this thing a test run, and if this thing does start up and run, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Echo PB-7910T backpack blower that had a shredded throttle cable. Thanks for watching. Later.